person. So anyways, I am going to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Rachel Robinson. I put my email if you have questions or want to see more pictures or hear. I love talking about travel, so I'm always happy to chat. My pronouns are she and her. I did want to do a land acknowledgement. So I am coming to you from Chicago, which is Kickapoo and Potawatomi land originally. I'm going to be talking about Malaysia, which is Orang Asli territory. And those of you who are in Summit County are on Ute land. And I encourage you, if you are somewhere else in the world, to check out nativeland.ca and find out about the territories and the indigenous people who originally inhabited your lands. So a little bit about me. Sarah mentioned I lived in Breckenridge for 2 years. It was the most spontaneous thing I've ever done to move there, and the greatest thing I've ever done. I made amazing friends like Sarah, and it changed my life. I worked at the ski school. I was a lifeguard. I did all kinds of stuff, Grand Timber Lodge. Then I moved on to Denver and taught Spanish in public school for 10 years. And then I spent 3 years in Malaysia teaching at an international school, and have been teaching in Chicago for the last year and a half, which is where I'm originally from. And just almost all these pictures are mine. I had to do a couple from the internet that I didn't have good things about. So Malaysia, where is it? I didn't know where it was before I moved there either. And basically what I always tell people is it's the tail end of Thailand. You know, Thailand has that long tail, and the bottom half is Malaysia. Part of Malaysia is also on the island of Borneo. So the green part is Malaysia, Brunei is in the middle, which is like a really wealthy country that's very strict, very strictly Muslim. And then the other part of Borneo is Indonesia. So there's two parts of Malaysia, and then Singapore is down at the end of Malaysia at the very tip. A few facts about Malaysia. The language that's spoken there is Bahasa, Melayu. There's another Bahasa, Indonesia, which is similar but a little bit different, that's spoken obviously in Indonesia. It's a Muslim country, so there are some laws that are like different than we would be used to in the US. For example, homosexuality is illegal there. Which was something that I really thought about before moving there. It's technically illegal for foreigners. I had quite a few friends who were gay and went to events with them that were geared towards the gay community, and it felt pretty safe. But there are instances where it's not safe, and it's definitely something to think about Malaysia. Other than that, I didn't really notice, you know, it's a pretty modern country, and there's a lot of, it's pretty, you know, life isn't that different from here. In terms of traveling, if you want to travel to Malaysia, which I recommend, you can have a 90-day free tourist visa, which is not always the case in Southeast Asia. When I went, because I didn't have a return ticket, I had a single entry visa and then got a work visa through my job. So that's that. And I found this little video to show you where it is in relation to us. You can see there's Kuala Lumpur. So Kuala Lumpur is about an hour inland from, oh no, it's gonna just keep playing, from the coast, from the west coast of Malaysia, and it is on a river. What's really interesting about Malaysia is that it's a total combination of three cultures, and has to do a lot with the history. So Malay is the indigenous culture, and then there's a huge Chinese population and a huge Indian population, both Hindu and Tamil. So those three cultures really get combined together. There's a subculture called the Boba and Nonya culture. Boba and Nonya are the words for grandma and grandpa, and they were couples that were generally second sons of Chinese families who came to Malaysia to seek their fortune because they weren't going to inherit their family fortune in China. That was the first son. And they generally married the daughters of wealthy Malaysian families, and then created this mixed culture. So yeah, just a ton of cultural influence, like curries are a big thing. but a lot of, it's just, I don't know, it was just really interesting to me. So Malaysia has 2 seasons technically. They call it dry and rainy, but it's really always rainy. Let's see if this video works, because it is, the rain is like unreal. And a little experience. It was somewhere I got caught trying to get home in the rain, but also it's very tropical, so lots of beautiful flowers. And Kuala Lumpur has one of the highest like per capita lightning strikes in the world. Kuala Lumpur and St. Pete's, Florida. So lightning was definitely impacted our lives, and you know, we would stay in, and a lot of after school sports canceled for lightning, unfortunately. Kuala Lumpur is the capital of Malaysia. You can see there on the map a little bit more closely where it is. And Indonesia is very close, which I don't think I really realized until I lived there. And we would have impacts, like when Indonesia was burning their palm fields, it impacted the air quality in Malaysia. So it's very close by, and Indonesia is much bigger. I lived in a part of Kuala Lumpur called Mont Kiara, which some people refer to as the Beverly Hills of Kuala Lumpur, which I didn't really feel that way, but there were quite a lot of fancy cars on this road. So I kind of call it a concrete jungle, because it does feel jungly. There's lots of trees, but there's also a lot of condo buildings. And this building with the arrow that's the building I lived in. This is Mont Kiara Boulevard, which was the main road that I walked up and down every day to get to work. These are some pictures, and I can see I missed editing that one to make it the right size. These are some pictures of houses. So there's definitely a British influence. Malaysia was a British colony until about 63, 64 years ago. So there's definitely sort of this British influence of those like row houses that you'd see in the UK as well. And I did have friends who lived in those. I lived in a condo. So these were a few of the perks of my lovely apartment: my rooftop pool and deck and gym. And I have a little video so you can see what my apartment looked like. Something that's interesting is the kitchens. I didn't have an oven. I just had a stovetop. So I'm a big baker, so that was a bit of a challenge for 3 years. But yeah, there are, obviously you can get ovens, but I just happen to not. But this is sort of an example of a small little apartment before I moved in, put all my stuff in it. Just so I did a fun, when I moved, I did like I played like House Hunters International, and showed all my friends my different places I was looking at. What's interesting in Malaysia for rentals is that you have to have a realtor. You can't rent without a realtor. So the renter has a realtor, and the landlord has a realtor. And even after you sign your lease and move in, you go through the realtor often to like talk to your landlord to get things fixed or taken care of. So that was kind of interesting, and a bit of a cultural difference for me. And this is the view from my rooftop. I got lots of good sunset pics, and I don't know if you can see really small in the distance, you can see the twin Petronas towers, which are pretty famous. Were at one point the tallest building in the world. And then the Menara KL, the KL tower, which kind of looks like the Space Needle. These are 2 other views from my apartment that I thought it was really important to highlight. You know, we kind of joke about like Instagram versus reality. So I lived in a really nice condo that cost about what a lot of people, my rent was what some people make in a month to live on or more. And this here was an abandoned lot right behind my building that they had started to build condos in and then didn't. And this is what's called a kampung, which is like a small community that popped up, and there's people basically living in like huts that they put together. There was some running water. I don't think they had electricity. Maybe they had something, but like a whole community popped up here, and obviously very different lifestyle than what I was living as an expat in Malaysia. But just thought it was really important to highlight that because there's a really big discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots there. And so that was kind of my view. And then out this way was the water treatment plant, which isn't very exciting either. But I just wanted to share that. So I worked at an international school. I worked at an international school that's an American international school, Mont Kiara International School. So this is our school. We had a gate. Something that is really interesting or different from in Malaysia is everywhere it has security guards, and they all have uniforms. So every mall has security guards. Every condo building has security guards. It's just like a really, I don't know, big thing there. And I felt very safe there, but everywhere you went had security guards. So it did feel safe. But that's our gate to get into school. This is some of our facilities. So we have a swimming pool, obviously. Our courtyard, there was a, where I was standing to take the picture, there's a big climbing wall, which I don't have a picture of. And this is our sports field, which again, you can see is surrounded by condo buildings. But there it is, very toasty out there in the field. And again, my view out the back of my classroom was more kampung. So more of these small, actually, this one's a bit more of a permanent, smaller houses inhabited by local Malays. And what, I don't know, these two aren't quite the same picture, but this picture on the left, about half of those houses got torn down for new condos in the years that I was there. And it's, the people are just displaced. They're given, you know, a small amount of money to leave their homes that they have been in their families and move to make way for these big condo buildings. So it's kind of a sad cycle of things. This is our hallway. So the hallways are all outdoors, which is kind of weird because it's very hot there. And then of course we have our indoor classrooms with air conditioning. So this was my classroom, my Spanish classroom there. I don't know, I just like to see like different schools, I guess. I'm a nerd. A couple of the things that I participated in and did there. And so it's an American school. It's just like any other American school. I coached swimming. I learned touch rugby and helped coach that. And then these pictures on the right are from a Burmese refugee school center that I took students to. We would go there once a month, I think, or every 2 weeks. I can't quite remember. And our kids would plan lessons and do lessons with these kids who are Burmese refugees. And it was so fun. And they were so excited to have us there and play games. And so those are a few things we did. A few interesting things about living in Malaysia. Malaysia has an employees provident fund, which is something that also I know exists in India and some other Eastern Asian countries. It's required by law. Everybody that works in Malaysia gets this. So my employer contributed 12% and I had to contribute 11%, but I could contribute more. I actually contributed 30% because I could afford to do that. Even though I was making less in Malaysia than I made in the US. And that money earned about 5 or 6% interest every year. And then when I left Malaysia, that was my money to take. So it's a really great savings. Like you really save a lot of money there. Something else that was not so fun was the tax restrictions. In order to be taxed as a local at 16% instead of 28%, you have to spend the first 182 days of the year in Malaysia. So, and you get like, I think there's like 10 days you can leave and you have to keep track of everything and fill out all these forms. So we kind of, that's referred to as tax jail. So that was kind of a bummer and impeded a little bit of my travel, but I tried to use it as a way to just really travel around Malaysia and get to know other parts of Malaysia because you could travel in Malaysia. So those were a couple of things that I didn't really know about before moving there that were definitely impacted my life. I tried to, there's a lot of slides here. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite things to do in KL and things that I've done. It's certainly not an exhaustive list. I didn't do everything. I didn't include everything I did. But just kind of show you some of the things that I saw and did in my life out and about in Malaysia. So KLCC is the downtown, which is, pretty well known. These pictures on the right are from the Heli Lounge, which is a bar that's set up actually at the top of a building on their helicopter pad. So during the day, it's a helicopter pad. And then at night, they bring out tables and stuff. And it's a really great place to watch the sunset. It's always packed. And you can see it's a great view of, the KL Tower and the Petronas Towers. One thing I never did was go up to the top of the Petronas Towers. I was saving that for my last few months in KL, and then the pandemic hit. So all those things I was saving to do when I was stuck in Malaysia in tax jail kind of got interrupted, unfortunately. Brickfields is the Indian neighborhood. And again, like I said, there's Hindu and Tamil influences and cultures. We happened to go on a holiday, and so there were some cows on the street celebrating, which was really fun. And, it was like this busy downtown street, and then there's cows, which is not something that you would see at home. Of course, really good food and the beautiful flowers. Chinatown and Central Market, these are really, so Chinatown has what are called 5-foot ways, and it's this covered walkway, basically covered sidewalk that goes under kind of the second floor of all the houses. And you find it in Chinatown in KL, you find it in Penang, in Singapore. It's a really traditional way of building houses, and I just find it really beautiful. So this is some of the stuff in Chinatown. And then Central Market is a big market down in Chinatown. This is on the right. If you are a friend of mine, you recognize those Central Market plates, which are very cheap versions of those fancy plates you would find and bowls you would find at Anthropology. So I certainly stocked up on those. But lots of fun stuff down there. And then of course the usual knockoffs, purses, fake Nikes, really good NBA basketball jerseys for $20, knockoffs, whatnot. Batu Caves is probably one of the most famous places in KL. If you Google it, they've repainted the stairs and they are beautiful, like Technicolor gorgeousness. Again, it was closed my last 3 months there, so I wasn't able to go see the new colors. These pictures are from when I first moved there. But it is a Hindu temple and a Tamil, or actually, I don't know if it's, I think it's Hindu, but also the site of a big Tamil celebration called Thaipusam, where observers wear these like metal, I don't even know how to describe them, these huge metal sort of contraptions that are poking them and chant themselves into a trance. And there's a huge parade and drums, and it's just incredible. So that happens here. So these are the stairs that we walk up. You can see here's some families going up with it. They often bring children up for celebrations, for blessings. So we would often see families going up the stairs, dressed for celebration. And you can't wear shoes, so everybody's going up barefoot, which, when I first moved to Southeast Asia, grossed me out, but you kind of have to get over it. So this is the view like in the caves once you get up, and some shrines and statues carved in there. Here's the view from the top. You can see all the people down at the bottom. And this was just a cool picture. I don't even know what this is. It was like old decorations and stuff, but then there's a family down here waiting to do their ceremony. And I just loved all the beautiful colors and patterns. The other thing that you'll find at Batu Caves, which actually you find all over Malaysia, just like we have squirrels here, are monkeys. They can be a little bit aggressive. They're bigger than squirrels. They look cute. These are a lot of pictures of babies, which are very cute. But they could be really aggressive. And like I was sort of chased by a group once on my way to meet a friend, and they kind of swiped at my leg, and then I just sort of yelled and they went away. But I sort of would cross the street and avoid them, because the ones that lived in our neighborhood, that were used to people, could get a bit aggressive. And we did have instances of them getting in the school and stuff, which, is not great. The Museum of Islamic Arts, like I mentioned, Malaysia is, I think has the largest Islamic population outside of the Middle East. Actually, that can't be true because Indonesia probably does, but it does have a very large Muslim population. So some beautiful art, beautiful designs. I really love Arabic calligraphy and the fabrics. Batik Fabric is really big in Malaysia and Indonesia. So a really neat tradition from there. Night markets are a huge thing. If anyone's been to Thailand, that's a big thing in Thailand too. There are these markets that just get set up at night with food, people selling scarves, clothing, jewelry, all kinds of stuff. This one was actually a Ramadan market. So it was set up at sundown for breaking fast during Ramadan. So it would get set up every night for the 40 days of Ramadan, which was really special to get to walk around and be a part of. There is a lot of hiking. It's very buggy, and there is a risk of dengue fever. So we wear a lot of bug spray, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's another monkey in the jungle, and just, it's very green and very lush, as you would expect. What I always used to tell people, if you've ever been in a conservatory, that sort of assault of humidity when you walk into a conservatory, that's what it feels like every time you go outside in Malaysia. One of the things that I really loved in KL were these Ryu pop-up craft fairs that were very like hipster, food trucks, all kinds of stuff. They were at different spaces. So this one was at Sentul Depot, which was the old train station where they used to fix trains. It's an abandoned building, which you can see has started to be taken back over by the jungle. But they used it and set it up with all sorts of crafts for sale, makers selling their stuff, and different food, and just a really fun community activity. There is a professional basketball team in Kuala Lumpur, and we did go to quite a few of their games, which was really fun. The star player actually happened to be a graduate of Whitney Young High School in Chicago, who was living over there and working there. So that was really fun. There's a picture of us with him. And yeah, it was just like a fun thing to do. Chinese New Year. So Malaysians love to celebrate everything, and decorations are huge. So these are a few pictures from the mall, just massive. Chinese New Year got decorations, Deepavali, Christmas decorations were out of control. Like, it's really fun. They just really enjoy a celebration, which I think is fun. This is, I'm going to say that wrong, Tan Hao Temple, which is the largest Buddhist temple in Kuala Lumpur, where we went for Lunar New Year for the year of the rat, which you can see there. So that was a beautiful, amazing experience. And I remember it was January and we were sweating, and my friend said, next year you're going to be freezing your butt off in Chicago at this time. And she was right. I was. So yeah, food is a huge deal in Malaysia. Everybody you talk to, what did you love about Malaysia? The food and the coffee shops and the restaurants. There are so many cute places. Everything is adorable. It was an Instagrammer's dream. So a couple of my favorites were Merchants Lane, which is in Chinatown, and Copenhagen, which was in Mont Kiara near me. And here's a picture of some of the food I loved. I tried to include some of the fruit, like there was just so much, the coconuts, just so much good food of all kinds. This is something I did not eat. It's hot dog sushi, but thought it was unique and decided to include it. But yeah, the food is just, that's probably the number one thing I miss, is the access to delicious, fresh food and the fruit. I don't have a picture of durian. I don't know if you're familiar with durian, called the king of fruits, but it is a Southeastern delicacy. It doesn't smell great if it's not something you're used to. Often at hotels, they have signs, they don't let you bring it into the hotel room because once the fridge gets the smell, it never goes away. But the street behind my house would have, when durian was in season, they would just, the whole neighborhood smelled like it. They would just be on the street lined up with truckloads, and it's hugely popular there. A couple of my other favorite foods, of course, ice cream. I ate a lot of ice cream. Roti is really traditional Malaysian food. And then there was a lot of great dim sum too, that Chinese influence. These are a few traditional Malaysian foods. Like I said, the roti with dal, nasi lemak, which is a chicken dish, and then chendol is their dessert. Southeast Asian desserts are very interesting. It's shaved ice, coconut milk, green jelly noodles, and those are red beans on top. So a little bit different. My mom and I shared one in when we were in Penang, I think. Yeah, in Penang, and it was the first and last time I ever needed to eat it, but it's a traditional dessert, so I wanted to share it. Grocery stores are amazing in Malaysia. This first picture is all the different kinds of rice. I had no idea there were so many different kinds of rice. Just some teas, different sauces. And this picture, the third picture from the right, is the alcohol and pork section. So because Malaysia is a Muslim country, but it does have a large Chinese population, there's a separate section of the store for alcohol and pork. So this was a big stack of Spam next to the cider. And you had to pay at a different cash register. One time I accidentally brought a pork product to the regular cash register, and my cashier wouldn't touch it. So she just said, "Can you just hold it up?" And she scanned it for me. And then of course I felt terrible. And so I tried to be really, conscientious about that, and just to be respectful. But one of the grocery stores, it was like this back section. It almost felt like, the X-rated back corner of the video stores, if you remember those. One of my favorite things in KL was the street art. There was amazing street art. I love street art in general. So these are just a few of my favorites from walking around and seeing. This is a real traditional building. You can see the 5-foot way there. This was down in Chinatown. And then something that I loved was you would just find this like random poetry. These were actually, all of these were in the same neighborhood. On my walk up to my hike, there was just people just put random poetry on the street signs and on the fences, and it's just really beautiful. I just really love things like that. So it was kind of a special thing. Malls are huge. Two or three of the world's 10 largest malls are in Malaysia, and they are giant. And people spend a lot of time in malls because they're air conditioned. So they're very popular. They often have children's play areas. Grocery stores are in malls. They have movie theaters. You can go spend the whole day there. So spend a lot of time at malls. And let's see, something that I loved was sustainability. There was a store called The Hive, which was growing as we were there, that sold, zero waste items. You could, get your refills of your grains and your oils and all of that stuff, and metal straws. There is a ton of plastic used in Southeast Asia, but recently there's really been a movement to try and limit that. So that was a cool thing to be a part of. I couldn't find a lot of massage pictures of this, but massages are super cheap in Malaysia. So we got massages a lot, either full massages or you go for foot massages, just like, oh, we're out for dinner, let's just go get our foot rub. It was really just a great, and the healthcare, I had some health issues while I was there, and was really pleasantly surprised by my experience. The hospitals were clean and modern. My doctor had studied in England. So I felt really, well taken care of there. I also had an experience going to a doctor of Eastern medicine, which was a really interesting experience as well, to just kind of try something different from the typical Western medicine that we're used to. But there is access to that. So there's me with an IV in my hand. I'm fine. So the pandemic hit in March, and Malaysia instituted the movement control order. And so we were basically, under lockdown, but it was called the movement control order. Here's some pictures. This was before I thought it was really going to last. So I have a bandana that I'm using as a mask. But this was me going to the grocery store to get food. And you can see we were lined up waiting to get into the grocery store, taking temperatures, etc. And having to write down our name and phone number everywhere we went, and our ID number. So yeah, it was, you were only allowed to be out if you were going to get food. You couldn't go more than 10 kilometers from your house. So if you were driving, there were checkpoints and you had to show where you lived. people were getting tickets for being out jogging. So one time I went to school to pick up some stuff and happened to be wearing workout clothes because it's hot, and the security guard was very worried that I was gonna, get in trouble for jogging until I showed him that I was wearing flip-flops. So I clearly was not gonna be jogging. But yeah, they were giving people tickets. And then these little pink things were when we did go back to school briefly at the end, we were taking all the students' temperature every morning. And so they would get these little pieces of paper when they got tested, and then they would give them to their first period teacher. So we would know that they were, that they had gotten tested and that they were okay to be at school. So yeah, unfortunately that put a little bit of a damper in some of my travel plans for the end of the year. But I felt really safe there, and like things were controlled, at least while I was there. Oh, and I just realized I forgot a picture. So that picture above Langkawi Island has nothing to do with Langkawi, but Langkawi is a beautiful island on the western coast of Malaysia. Penang is the old British capital of Malaysia, so really cool, tons of heritage there. Perhentian Islands are one of the world's greatest places for scuba diving and snorkeling, and way cheaper than doing that in a lot of other places. And then Malacca is also a really beautiful, there's a castle there and all kinds of interesting things. It was a big capital of commerce and trade. So those are some of my favorite spots in Malaysia. And I think that's my whole spiel. So luckily I'm a fast talker. I did include this picture of a cat because I didn't have a lot of them, but there are cats everywhere in Malaysia. I was one of very few people who managed to leave Malaysia without adopting a cat. And something funny about cats in Malaysia is there's some sort of genetic mutation, and their tails look like they've been chewed off. They all have short little stubby kind of crooked tails, which when I got there, I thought what's wrong? Somebody ate their tail? And it turns out that's just sort of a genetic mutation, and they're born that way. So this was a very cute kitten that we saw somewhere that I did almost take home, but didn't. But yeah, there's a lot of cats. Not a lot of dogs, which, because it's a Muslim country, but yeah, cats everywhere. So yeah, that's it. Again, my email, feel free to reach out if you have questions. These are some of the places I traveled while I was living there. So, I could talk for hours about travel, but I hope that gave you a little bit of an idea of what I saw and what I did while I was living there. And I guess, Sarah, we'll just see if there's any questions. Or
You did get a few questions.
Oh, okay.
The first one was, how much was rent in the condo building per month?
Okay, so my rent was, I just got something in my mouth. My rent was 2,000 ringgit, 2,100 ringgit, which is about $525 a month, which sounds like nothing. But I could have gotten a smaller apartment in an older building for probably 1,200 or 1,400. I just chose to live there. A lot of people, for example, the security guards at our work didn't even make 2,000 ringgit a month. Probably I think the lifeguard at our school pool and some of the assistants around our school made about 2,000 ringgit a month. So to put it in perspective, for me, it was okay because I was making much more than that. And so it was a small enough percentage of my pay, but I used to get really embarrassed in Grab cars. Grab is the Uber there. Sometimes the Grab driver would say oh, what's your rent? And I would tell him, and they'd be like, oh, and then I would feel really uncomfortable because my rent was sort of comparable to their monthly earnings, which definitely, feels a little weird. But yeah, again, compared to my rent in Denver and Chicago, it's very cheap.
What languages do you speak? And I was going to try to be French and Spanish, but I was
so I speak, I'm fluent in Spanish. I speak workable French. I speak a little Italian and very little Hebrew, but I sometimes can pull things out when I remember. And I really didn't, to my dad's dismay, I did not really learn Bahasa while I was there. I learned a couple of words and, terima kasih, thank you, things like that. But really everybody spoke English for the most part, or some version of English. What's interesting is Malaysia, the schools were taught in English until about, I think, the 70s. And then they switched back to having the main language of the schools be Bahasa. So like the older generation, like some of the older women who worked in the offices in our school spoke perfect like Queen's English. But then the younger generation speaks English, but it's a little bit more of a broken mix of English and Bahasa. So, so that's, yeah, that's interesting. So those are the languages I speak. But in Southeast Asia, you know, part of being an English speaker is that you really have a privilege that almost everywhere you go, you're going to find people who speak English.
You said you were sweating in January. What was the temperature?
So the temperature was like always in the 80s and 90s with like 80% humidity. To be honest, I didn't really look at the temperature because it was just always hot. So it was just sort of like, you knew if you were going out, you were going to be sweating. And it rained almost every day. So like when I walked to work, I always wore rubber flip-flops and took real shoes because, you know, at 3 or 4 days out of the week, I'd be walking home in the rain or in puddles. So yeah, I didn't really look at the temperatures, but it's usually in the 80s, sometimes in the 90s. But again, it's that 80-90% humidity all the time that is the real kicker.
And how much would meals cost at the market or in general? Was it cheaper to eat out than to go to the store and cook?
So that's a great question. It actually, for me as a single person, I found it to be basically the same, if not a little cheaper. There were places where I could get like a fresh made salad with vegetables and protein and whatnot for 16, 18 ringgit, which actually is a lot. In Malaysia, it didn't feel like a lot for me. That's like $4. But for example, like a roti would be like 1 or 2 ringgit, so like left 50 cents. So we would go to Pilita, was this little Malaysian place. Not little, it was a big Malaysian place behind my house, and you know, meals would be $2-3. And so in the night markets and those kind of places, you could definitely eat for, I mean, anywhere you really could eat for less than $4 or $5. But you could splurge and, you know, have a $10 meal would be really fancy and nice. So yeah. So yeah, there were a lot of times I didn't cook because it was cheaper and easier just to eat out. And I definitely miss how cheap the food was. Like sushi was cheap. That was one of the biggest adjustments coming back, was how much I have to pay for food and like Uber rides. The Grabs are very cheap there. So that was a big adjustment. And
I love to bake too. How do you get around not having an oven?
So yeah, I don't know. I just did it. I did make I make like chia puddings for my sweet tooth. I was able to get Ben and Jerry's there, so that was also great. And then one of the things I like to make is cake balls. So I would buy a cake mix. My friend Jennifer would bake the cake at her house, and then I bring it back to my house and make the cake balls. But it was so hot there that I kind of enjoyed like not having an oven and not having cooking. And it really you kind of felt like you were always on vacation, even though I was working full time and teaching and, you know, had a normal life, because I lived in my building actually half of my building was a hotel. And so it just felt different than living and working in the States. And it kind of felt like I was always sort of on vacation, and, you know, the fact that we could eat out cheaply and stuff. So I really didn't miss cooking or baking. And yeah, it was kind of a nice little break for a few years, but I'm excited to have an oven now. And my coworkers certainly are excited that I have an oven.
I think that's it, but if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions, you're welcome to. You did get some thanks for sharing. This talk was wonderful. Great job. Such wonderful experiences. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.